Yeah.
Hey, do you have a minute?
I have
Are you in
this.
the middle of something?
No, I have this meeting. Sorry. Sorry.
I have a question. I don't know if you're trying to do or Christine.
Come on in. I just might have to answer here if people start talking.
Well, and you need to drop.
Yeah.
So here's a short version. Husband and wife, 2 kids. Wife's the petitioner, kids are currently protected. He's out of the house. So based upon what I have heard, and I've heard both, I'm gonna grant the order for her.
Judge David, you are not muted.
Thank you.
Text Anthony, has the meeting started?
Ms. Mosser, you are not muted.
Oh, thank you. Well, then that explains it. I got put into another courtroom for some reason.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum. Madam Recording Secretary, could you please call roll?
Braca,
Here.
Barrera, Berman, Conant, Cruz, David,
Here.
Felton,
Here.
Vita, Payne, Hull, Molina,
Present.
Mosser, Pirog, no, and Wallers. We do have a quorum.
Okay, actually, that there was only 7 that answered by my count.
Rochelle.
Right, Ms. Conan, is on mute.
Ms. Conant, are you present?
And I just texted her to see if we could find Nick Vita. So
I am here, sorry.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we do now have a quorum. My name is Judy Braca. I am the chair of the Judicial and Public Safety Technology and Strategic Planning Commission. And this is a meeting that is called to address certain matters on the agenda and to advise the commission of matters that will need also to be discussed in January. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes to review? Well, actually, let me ask the negative. Is there anyone who has not received the copies of the minutes from the October 21st, 2021 meeting prior to this meeting being called to order? If so, please indicate your name and that you have not received it. No individuals responding. It appears everyone has received a copy. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 21st, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Judge Hull moved. Is there a second?
Molina will second.
Thank you. There is a second. Any discussion, corrections, amendments, comments? Hearing none. Madam Recording Secretary, could you please call the roll for a voice vote?
Braca,
Yes.
Ferrero,
Yes. Yes.
Berman, Conan,
Yes.
Cruz, David,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Peta, Hain, Hull,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Mosser,
Yes.
Pirog, and Wallers. Accepted.
Thank you. Moving on to the next order of business, the CMS reports. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Roger Fonstadt and Bob Enright for further proceedings and presentation.
So, good afternoon. This is Roger Fonstock, and Bob, do you want to go through the slides that you had first? You want to do that first? So Blair, can we pull up the CMS report? Second.
Right, so the case manager report, I mean, we didn't have very many meetings, I think, last year, so some of these numbers are outdated or, you know, we haven't seen them before. So these are some of the comparisons between 2020 and 2021. What's interesting is a lot of the work that the circuit clerk and our judicial partners did last year was, we'll see it here in the next slide, is we had a lot of new case types. Okay, and so while it looks nice and easy here on the, you know, we have a domestic violence case type, it's a lot of work to configure and implement and test and put, you know, fines and charges and state reporting. So the circuit clerk's office and the judicial partners spend a lot of time putting these new case types in place. So we have some new criminal, and same thing on the divorce. There's a new case types for divorce with children, without children. And there's just a lot of implications, you know, for staff. And so, you know, kudos to circuit clerk staff and the judicial partners for putting all of this work in. The next collections is, oh, go ahead.
Can I make a comment?
All right, if you'd please identify.
This is Monica Lawrence, and I would like to make a comment about the case types. Along with the new case types that went in 2022, we also switched more to an incident base. So some of our case types will start reflecting a reduction in the number of cases filed. However, that is because of the fact that everything is incident based. So prior, if we had a criminal misdemeanor case and we had 3 traffic charges, those would have been 4 separate case numbers that would have been assigned. And now it is only 1 case number being assigned. So that will reflect going forward a difference in the cases, case filings.
Ms. Lawrence or Madam Clerk, could you please indicate whether these changes were made in accordance with changes to the manual on record keeping issued by the Supreme Court, or whether these were internal or both?
This is Monica Lawrence, and it was made in regards to the manual on record keeping. And it also, changes were made also to start reflecting for the judiciary different time standards, because there is different times that they are looking for the cases to be resolved.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, these were not changes initiated at the behest of the Kane County Circuit Clerk's Office, but rather as a requirement made by the Illinois Supreme Court.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Go ahead.
The next thing I wanted to show you was collections. If to the untrained eye, it could possibly look like the collections not, well, they are going down. Less cases are being submitted, and less is getting collected. But that is a reflection of the fact that when we converted over to Odyssey, we were able to identify cases that had been sitting, that had not been submitted for collections. So when we converted to Odyssey, Circuit Clerk's Office was able to identify tens of thousands of cases that had not been submitted for collection, had not been paid. And I would say we're pretty caught up.
Playing catch up, yeah.
Yeah, so we're back where we should be. And so that's why it might look like what's going on? Why aren't we collecting or submitting as much as we used to? So that's what's reflected in those numbers.
Thank you. Madam Recording Secretary, could you please reflect that Commission Member Judge Renee Cruz has logged in remotely? Go ahead, Mr. Enright.
Wait, thank you, Judge. So we've completed a lot of projects over the past year or year and a half. I won't go through the whole list, but we have been between circuit clerk, public defender, state's attorney, judicial. We have completed a lot of various projects and keep plugging away. As everyone has heard, we have a Safety Act. And so people have been putting a lot of time and effort to comply with that. And 2023, I think what we're going to try to do is upgrade the Odyssey case management system to the latest and greatest release. And that's always a big effort. So that's kind of what we have on the horizon. I'll let Monica, if you have anything else you want to add to. And I think that's about it.
Mr. Enright, when you say the latest release, what year release are you talking about for the Odyssey?
So they call it 2022, even though it's next year's 2023. Odyssey is calling their latest release 2022.
2018 was finished.
Yes, 2018, yes.
This is stepwise process. Do you have to do 2020 and then 2022? Or can you jump to 2022?
We can jump.
Are there any questions from any of the commission members to Mr. Enright on any part of the CMS project reports? None having been presented. Mr. Enright, is there anything else that you need to finish on your report?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Feinstock.
Good afternoon. This is Roger Fonstock again. We're going to be going through some of the information on the budget for fiscal year 2023. That's under item 3A. It's like 1 through 3. So a lot of this is specific to the budget process that the county goes through every year. And we didn't have our last regularly scheduled meeting, which is usually the place where we approve of the 127 fund budget. And when I say 127 fund, I'm describing the fund that has the revenue from the RTA sales tax that's appropriated to the judicial sales tax fund. It's 6% of the RTA sales tax, which was a state statute that created the RTA sales tax. The 6%, then the balance of that goes to KDOT, and there's also a public safety portion of the sales tax as well. But the judiciary is 6%. In years past, that's been somewhere around $1.2 million in revenue. And then there's scheduled expenses that are for court case management and for the court stakeholders that we use for paying the expenses of the court case management system and consulting upgrades, integration services, and a couple of other training events that we attend. So we're going to look at the budget transaction report. This is basically transaction by transaction. What went into the actual requests for the budget. And one of the things that I'd like to point out in the transaction report is that, most of these items remain relatively constant. There's and Blair, I don't know if you can make that larger or not, but you can go in a little bit. Yeah. And then scroll down a little bit. So when you're looking at this, and the top part of it is personnel, all the numbers to the left, they'll show you the different account numbers, and then the description is in the next column. And then as you go down through that list, most of the top part is the personnel and wages, which was 304,511. I believe, actually, if you can go back up a little bit, I can't quite see it. You know what? It doesn't have it all in this chart. There's another one that's going to show you the 304,000. But as you go down to software licensing costs, you'll see $170,000, which is similar to what we budgeted last year. We carried that over for contractual and consulting services. And then software license costs, you'll see budgeted amount. It's $500,000 for Tyler maintenance. There's the compliance document storage, Google for the ECO. There's a success account manager in there. There's Chromebook management, DocuSign renewal that we have. And the total for all of the software licensing cost was $675,000. So the $675,000 in software license cost and the $170,000 in consulting services, plus the salary, wages, and benefits, is primarily what consumes the judicial sales tax budget. That's pretty much all that's in there. We did have a discussion with Joe Onzik, and we'll get into that in a little bit, about new revenue. And Joe made some adjustments through finance, the chief financial officer, that added approximately $135,000 in new revenue to the budget. And that's something that we'll address with the e-discovery and the project that we have for the state's attorney and public defender offices. There's also an adjustment where the $170,000 in contractual and consulting services is being moved to the IT department expense, and then that money's being reallocated to the e-discovery. So none of the changes from that are going to reflect a decrease in what we spend on the current Tyler and court case management system, but there is new revenue and then consulting services being shifted to the IT budget for accommodating e-discovery. So if I go to the next slide, Blair, or go down, I guess. Yeah. You can go down to the bottom and you'll see that the total expenses budgeted for this year, $1,079,000. And these are the transactions that are not specific to just the personnel wages. If you go to the next page, Blair. these are the personnel. So you had the 1,079,000 plus these positions at 304,000. So you're at about $1,384,000. When you see these, you'll see a couple positions that have ZZZ in front of them. Those were new positions that were added for 2023. There is half of a project management position that we wanted to add for doing additional project work. The other half of that is going to be coming from IT and building management. And then there's another web developer that we had asked for to help with web development and some of the application development that we need to be doing with the courts. So that was $65,000 and $40,000. So there's roughly $105,000 increase in the personnel wages cost, which also has benefits associated with it. So that's an area where we did request more funding, and it was accommodated by the initial additional revenue that we had in the fund. And now we have a subsequent addition of revenue from Joe that was recently recommended as a part of the e-discovery resolution. There's even an additional amount of revenue that he's identified. The last ZZZ payroll is a payroll accrual for simply the difference between a payroll that occurs at the end of the fiscal year, and we have to do the accrual to make sure that the money is there to finish all of the payroll for partial payroll periods. So collectively, let's see, Blair, which one are we on? Keep going down. Keep going down. It gets easier. I got a better view of this. Okay. Okay, you can stop there. Go up a little bit so I can see the title. Okay. So we had been asked about the fund balance and the balance sheet. I think this is something that before we get into talking about the budget and voting on the budget and those things, the balance sheet represents the available funds regardless of what we budgeted or have expended, in the actual budgeted expenses. This is what sits in the fund. And probably the most important item on this is the fund balance unreserved, which is 1.138. So 1,138,000. And we've been working hard to try and manage the payments for the maintenance and other services over the course of the year. We receive the revenue monthly. So we don't get all the money at the beginning of the year. So we have to have enough fund balance to accommodate all of the expenses and the maintenance costs as we accrue or as we receive the revenue. So we have a healthy fund balance. It wasn't that way a number of years ago. I'd like to, thank Charles Lasky, Brooke Hampel, and the people on our team that have worked to get this fund balance back up. At one time, if you remember, we were borrowing money from the general fund while we collected money to basically pay them back. So we're ahead of the game. We're in good shape, but we did have the unreserved balance at 1.138, and that's as of November 30th. So right before the fiscal year started. And I know, Madam Chair, you'd asked for a copy of the balance sheet. This is the balance sheet. So the next slide, let's see, Blair, that's more on the same budget detail. Keep going down, Blair, if you could, please. Keep going. We got to get past the balance sheet. Next one. Okay. So again, this is the budget worksheet. This is the part that Charles, myself, Brooke, we enter in information for the budget every year, starting from basically what we had the previous year, which was the 2022 budget. Again, you're going to see the change in salary and wages. It goes from 201 to 304,000. That's the 1.5 people basically that were added. There was 65,000 for the web developer and 40 for the partial of a project manager. As you go down through this, you're going to see the increases for the corresponding benefits. If you keep going down to the bottom, there's the 170,000 in contractual consulting services. 170,000 is going to be reduced by, I think it's $85,000 in the resolution, and moved to an IT expense for the e-discovery That consulting work is stuff that the IT department does to augment staff. And then you also have the software license cost increase to $675, and that's for some of the additional licensing like DocuSign. We had increased storage for compliance and some other software that we purchased for the courts. So you had a 16% increase in software license cost. Liability insurance also from what we get from the county as far as our portion of liability also went up. But those are the main increases. Conference and meetings stayed the same. But if you see if you can, I think keep going down, Blair, I'm sorry. As you get to the bottom, you'll see that overall there's a 21% increase. We went from 1.146, so $1,146,000 in 2022 to $1,384,000 in 2023. So that matches revenue with expenses and balances the budget, and we have a 21% increase. The 21%, as I stated, is mostly salary and wages for the 1.5 positions, and the increase in software licensing costs, plus obviously the employee benefits. But that's the proposed budget for 127 fund. There's not anything drastically new. I think the 1.5 positions that we have in the budget were to try and respond to some of the demand of projects and services that we're receiving from the courts. The additional software, I think, has been incredibly helpful for electronic signing and taking the opportunity to gain the efficiency of sending signature signing documents electronically through the internet. I think that's been a huge help. But those are the main changes that you're going to find in there. So we're recommending the revenue of 1.384 million and the expenses of 1.384 million with those corresponding changes. Again, the budget transaction report, it's in your packet. There's a lot of detail. And Blair, if you can scroll down through that, I think there's one more. I think I may have jumped back up. I don't know why, but I keep jumping back up through the stack. Yeah, that chart right there. So this is what goes in front of the finance committee as the budget. And it shows you the revenue and it shows you the expenses. In this budget, the revenue is $1,360,000 in 2023, plus interest revenue of 600, plus cash on hand from the fund balance of 23,689. And then we match expenses at 1,384,289. And the corresponding personnel, contractual, and then contingency or other. There is a portion of this where it says transfers out, and that is for the enterprise or basically the comprehensive expenses of what we do for all of the IT department services for the staff and people that work in this group. So that's a transfer out to the IT department to pay for the services that we provide to the 127 fund. So with that, that's the budget presentation and the numbers that you have in front of you. Again, I think we balance the revenue and expenses. We have increase in the 1.5 staff. And then we also had the software licensing increases for, like I said, DocuSign. We also had some increases in some of the other costs for software. It is, I think, a roughly 20% increase over last year, but we also had a significant revenue increase over last year too. So the fund balance is healthy. It's over $1 million fund balance, which was not where we were maybe 4 years ago. And eventually, I think in the agenda, we have a resolution or the request to approve of the 127 fund budget for 2023. So with that, if there's any questions about the budget, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Are there any questions for Roger on budget? I just want to make a clarifying couple of questions. So the budget that you are indicating, which would be called for question at the appropriate time.
Yes.
Would be the expense budget worksheet report with the balance for the final 2023 budget of $1,384,289.
Yes. And that's on the screen
Correct.
now.
And,
Yes.
The breakdown detail of it is that document I just stated, the expense budget worksheet report,
Yes.
budget year 2023.
Those are the actual entries that build those numbers. Yes.
And the only other question that I have is to clarify whether any part of that proposed budget includes monies for the e-discovery purchase or not.
At this time, they would be taking $85,000 from the consulting services. In the resolution you had, it was $85,000 from consulting. They would move that to software licensing costs. And the $85,000 in consulting would be moved to the IT expense. And
Okay.
it's in our IT budget, which
So
is
that's the only thing that's reflected on this budget.
on that one. And then there in the resolution that is for the e-discovery, they add another $135,000 in revenue to this budget.
Right, that's a separate issue, right?
Absolutely.
And so the 135,000 additional revenue that you say that Mr. Anzak had come up with is as well not reflected anywhere in the
It is.
2023 calculation.
It is not. It would be take the 1.36 million that's in the 2023 draft budget. It would increase it by $135,000, or so our revenue would go up by 135,000 and our expenses would go up.
Okay. All right, that was the clarifying questions I had.
Yes.
Are there any questions of Mr. Fonstock from the commission members concerning this budget presentation? Okay. Hearing none, then that having completed the budget presentation portion of number 3, there is an intervening item before the question is called on the budget
Yes.
approval. And because there is one line item that does that 85,000 from consulting to another fund that does involve the e-discovery draft proposal, I think it is prudent to address that in the order in which it is on the agenda, which is the electronic discovery issue, before calling the question on the budget proposal, since there is something that is in the budget for that. And Mr. Fonstock, are you making that presentation or is that Ms. Masser?
I would like to walk through the actual e-discovery portion of this, and we also have Anthony Ortiz still here. He's still here, just in case we have questions, but I think I can answer present it and answer some questions, and we have Anthony here as well. But I'm prepared to talk or speak to that part of the agenda.
Okay, if I can inquire then of State's Attorney Masser. Ms. Masser, do you have any objection to Mr. Fonstock making at least the initial presentation, or would you like to make the presentation yourself or designate someone else on your behalf?
I have no objections to Mr. Fonstock beginning. Mr. Ortiz is there to go through the need for the discovery system. And then Ms. Conant and I are both here to answer any questions that anyone may have.
All right, thank you. Oh,
Thank you.
Yes, it was listed on as the state's attorney's presentation, but I
Yes.
would note that the electronic discovery issue actually addresses both the public defender and the state's attorney in the budgeting aspect.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Mr.
Okay.
Fonstock.
Yes, and just for clarification, item 3, it begins with SAO but ends with PDO. And it was, I believe, because Anthony was working on the quotes and working on this, and he's with the state's attorney's office. But item number 3 under 4A3 is actually the PDO portion. So, but what has transpired, there was a request for proposals that was done, and Anthony Ortiz in the state's attorney's office had done this. They did a competitive process with purchasing department. They got a procurement synopsis back, and the overwhelming recommendation was to go with Axon for their e-discovery, and it's basically the indexing and storage of the video from body cameras and evidence. So once we had the recommendation and we were looking for the budget and authority to enter into an agreement to get this, we spoke with the Chief Financial Officer, Joe Wanzik, about funding sources. So they presented the proposals and information to Joe and actually to the IT department, myself. And we were trying to identify the funding that would be required for this project, which at the time, we were looking at I think it's about $220,000. So it was 135 plus 85, so $220,000 for the first year. In doing that, Joe Onzik's recommendation was, that he thought we had additional revenue in the 127 fund, and if we could make some adjustments to our consulting services, that there would be sufficient funds to do a project like this from somewhere where we have recurring revenue, which is the sales tax. So we took the procurement synopsis and the quotes and the recommendations, and I believe Anthony did some fine tuning with them to get it is a 10-year proposal for the software as a service with Axon. The total price of the proposal is about 2.6 million for the 10 years. And again, the initial cost, of $220,000 would be coming from the budget adjustments to increase revenue, 135,000. And then we would also increase our software licensing cost by 85,000 and shift $85,000 of the consulting services to the IT department. So Blair, if you can go down one more. There's a series of quotes, and it reflects the 2.4 million in this one for the costs for 10 years. And if you go down one more and another one and keep going, these are the part and SKU numbers that total up the cost. And one more. And again, keep going. And one more. There you go. And this is the public defender cost of 248,000. So the 2.4 and the 248 combined is what the 10-year costs look like. So it is about 2.6 million over the course of 10 years. And they do have, cost increases throughout the 10 years, but the total value of the contract is roughly 2.6 million. This year, if you go to the next page, Blair, and keep going. These are all the SKU numbers and part numbers in the quotes. You don't need to necessarily, this is the resolution. So if you could zoom in on that, Blair, and the focus on the fiscal notation at the bottom. This is where we're talking about what happens with the fund. So what you'll see is the RTA sales tax gets an increase of $135,000 in sales tax. And you'll see the $85,000 being taken out of contractual consulting, and you'll see the software licensing costs going up by $220,000. And that's the cost of doing this in fiscal year 2023. The other fiscal notation below that is the transfer of the 85,000 to the IT department's expense. So you'll see $135,000 increase the revenue, $85,000 decrease in contractual consulting. Software licensing costs goes up by $220,000, and that's the money that pays for the e-discovery system. And we would be making subsequent, budget requests for that system from this point forward based on the term of the contract. And that would just be a budget request annually that would be a part of our normal budget process. So the resolution that's being recommended for the state's attorney and public defender's office is for a 10-year term. And the beginning initial cost is the $220,000 per year. And eventually, as the increases annually are budgeted and continue to increase, you would eventually be spending 2.6 million over the 10-year period. with the increases. So I think it's important to understand the budget adjustments as it relates to the commission because of the 127 fund. Just knowing that we're moving some money within the budget to add revenue and to move a couple of line items to accommodate the $220,000 for the e-discovery system. I think within the state's attorney's office, the public defender's office, IT, even the sheriff, we've all been working with body cameras and car cameras and trying to get a way to have a better e-discovery and technology solution for evidence. And I think that Anthony and the people that did the review and RFP, we've done a good job. We've got a good product. I believe it's one of the best, if not the best, product for e-discovery. It is not cheap. It is what it is. It costs money to provide the storage, to provide the software and the indexing to do this. And I think we have the resources and the funding in place with the help of finance and everybody involved to actually make this happen and happen, in short order. It is software as a service. So you're paying for it as a service. You're not buying a capital item. It does have recurring costs, but again, I think it's something that's been needed for some time. And I think, the term and the costs are what we expected. And again, it's something that we want to demonstrate in the budget for the 127 fund that it's budgeted. This is something that's on agenda for the December 13th county board meeting to approve of this resolution. And it's our recommendation that the budget for the 127 fund be approved with the amendments to add the additional $135,000 revenue and to make the reduction in the contractual and consulting by 85,000 and to increase the software licensing budget by 220,000. So those three changes to the budget as it was presented earlier.
Mr. Fonstadt, you've spoken already with Joe Anzick about this, correct?
Yes.
So what does that annual 220,000 plus deduction from the 127 fund for software licensing
Yes.
cost due to the fiscal stability of the fund that we just looked at the balances on right now? When you said it's in a good place right now, it hadn't always been like that. We had to borrow money from the general fund, etc. What's
Yep.
the likelihood of the fund being able to sustain this in addition to maintaining the Odyssey system?
So, the other licensing costs from Tyler and the other licensing costs in the actual budget make up about $675,000 of the 1.4 million that we have in revenue. So this would add another 260,000 at the end of the contract to the licensing costs. You'd still be less than $1 million. So you would be having to lose, 20-30% of your revenue from the sales tax to effectively not be able to maintain the asset or maintain the contractual services. That doesn't mean that you could continue the staffing of personnel or other things through it, but you certainly could, support the license costs. We don't have any indication that the sales tax revenue would go down. In fact, it's gone up ever since it was instituted. So I think it's a stable source of revenue. It seems to continue to either remain constant or go up. I don't think that, and our fund balance is in a good position. We're, at one point, I think it's about 1.2 million, a little over 1.1 million right now in the fund balance. And we continue to get increasing, revenue. If you have a recession, other economics at play, you might see some loss of revenue in terms of sales tax if the economy slows down. But, again, I don't think we've had a recession that incurred more than a 3% loss in CPI or the consumer price index in 30 years. So I think it's a pretty stable source of revenue for the county and for this project. Since we've had the sales tax like I said, it's only increased in the revenue for the fund. So I think we're in a good position to do this. I don't see any risk or threat of the fund, being insufficient. I will say that there's always needs and that there's a lot of need throughout all of the offices for everything from software to hardware to technology, people. And the competition for scarce resources will never go away, I don't think.
Before I turn to the actual, I guess, move-ins, in the sense that this is a joint proposal for the state's attorney's office and the public defender's office for further comment. Are there any questions from the commission members directed to Mr. Fonstock about the presentation that he made on this issue of e-discovery funding and the resolution?
I have what brief one.
Yes, sir. And it's
So-
Judge Cruz.
Yeah, so it's Renee Cruz. So if I'm reading it right, is there 50 licenses that are being obtained from this particular proposal?
So I believe the licensing is between the two agencies, somewhere around 150, and that provides for some room to grow. And also there's negotiations that will increase the licensing over the term of the contract as the agency requires more users. Blair, I think if you scroll back up, the Exxon paperwork had different proposals, and we can have Anthony answer that as well, probably. Anthony, is that correct? 150?
All right, sir, if you would step forward and identify yourself and your title and office.
I'm Anthony Ortiz, the Director of Operations for the King County State's Attorney's Office.
Thank you.
So it's 150 for the SAO and 50 for the PDO. And every year the SAO gets 3 additional license for room for growth. Does that answer your question, Judge?
Yeah, so 150 licenses. So that's attorneys, staff. Yeah, I guess there's many people in your office, up to 150, that would have access to view or manipulate, have access to these videos. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and then the public defender is getting a smaller amount. So the question I asked then is, in my particular courtroom, I have to look at these videos all the time as well. Will me as a third-party user need a license as well to be able to use these, or no?
No, we'll send you a link, how we currently send the PDO a link, and you'll be able to view them, download them and view them.
Okay.
There's 2 different types of licensing. This is Roger again, Judge.
Okay.
The one license is a pro license, which has the ability to do annotation, editing, and I think they, do a lot of different features for work with the lawyers and people trying to build their evidence or case. And then there's the viewing of the information, and the viewing licenses, we can send it to other parties and they can view it for free.
Okay, and this is independent of what software the various local law enforcement agencies use. Exxon will be able to convert those all into a format that can then be distributed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions then directed further to Mr. Fonstock or to Mr. Ortiz? Okay, no other questions being presented. Thank you, Mr. Ortiz.
Thank
may
you.
be seated. I believe that there are actually then 2 issues that are voting issues. One is to address the issue of the commission's approval of the SAO draft resolution for use of 127 funds. And the other issue is the budget approval. So that's 4A sub 4 and then 4B. Okay, so I'm going to ask if as to 4A sub 4 on the agenda, the SAO PD draft resolution, is there a motion to approve that resolution for submission to the county board? Because that's what we are doing. we are not approving the resolution for entry. We are addressing whether this commission should approve this for the county board to take it up in their legislative wisdom. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Dalton.
Second, Ferrero.
Okay. Discussion. This then, I believe, Ms. Masser and Ms. Conant, if you wish to interject anything in discussion, I will allow you that opportunity first as the move-ins, and then other commission members may put questions to you on this. Ms. Masser, is there anything else that you wish to add or submit as to your resolution?
Thank you. Part of the reason why this is coming up as quickly as it has was due to some requirements that were in the Pretrial Fairness Act. Up until this new amendment was signed into law, which I believe occurred on Tuesday, there was a requirement that the state's attorney's office get certain discovery from the police departments to tender to defense counsel. And now, while we don't have that requirement anymore for our bond here, our detention hearings and conditions of release hearings, it is my opinion that this will significantly help our court system and our cases because we will get discovery quicker from police departments. And in addition to that, we'll be able to tender it to defense counsel in a much better way than we have thus far. In addition to ourselves, the Aurora Police Department and the Elgin Police Department both use this same discovery system. And those are the two biggest producers of the discovery that we have. So again, we are going to move cases along at a quicker rate. And so I am obviously very much in support of this and am here to answer any and all questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Conant, is there anything that you wish to submit on behalf of the Public Defender's Office on this resolution covering both offices?
Nothing more than what's in the resolution. Thank you.
Further discussion from any other commission members as to questions to either the state's attorney or the public defender or your own comments?
I would indicate, this is Renee Cruz, that being in the courtroom where I think I see the majority of the videos that are generated from the law enforcement agencies, having some uniformity of this type with the two largest producers, I think will speed up the process considerably.
Okay. Thank you, Judge Cruz.
Thank you.
I would just add, Judge Braca, this is Chief Judge Clint Hall. As was alluded to, the Supreme Court introduced rules that went into effect that are time standards, which require the cases get completed in a certain period of time. In the criminal justice system, having a discovery system that will allow this type of exchange will help us make sure that we satisfy those requirements. So again, talking about the two agencies that Ms. Masters talked about, I do believe that it would help us achieve those objectives. And I am supportive of an e-discovery system.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Barrero?
Thank you, Judge. I just want to add that I appreciate all the questions and answers that were brought up regarding this. It helps me to understand it a little more as to where we are going to get the funding from. The only other question, something's wrong with my microphone. The only other question is kind of logistics with installing this and that. What is going to be required of your office, Roger, and how will that then affect the rest of our offices while it's getting installed?
So
Mr. Feinstein.
yeah, this is Roger Fonstack. The software is software as a service. So it's configurable software that the State's Attorney and Public Defender's Office will need to configure with the vendor. They provide the installation and services in their cloud environment. So we're not installing or configuring or putting it on our infrastructure. It's actually just provided by the software company. So the state's attorney and public defender will have work to configure it with the vendor, which those services are included in the proposal. And I know Anthony is a big part of that and we'll be working with the vendor. We obviously will help provide the assistance that we need in order to help them with the project, but I think it'll be primarily software as a service and not a heavy burden on
Excellent.
the county.
Excellent.
I do have another question. This is for S.A. Masser. We've talked about Aurora and Elgin. I know that we usually go through the top 5, Aurora, then we have Elgin, then we have the sheriff's office. Is the sheriff's office on this system or is there any sort of thought that if this was approved by the county board, we would be able to try to encourage more police departments within the Kane County area to use this program in order to, again, help with, trying to get everybody on the program?
That's a good question. I did talk to Sheriff Hain. He does have a different provider. I believe that provider may be up in the next couple of years. Then with the idea that as he decides whether or not to keep that provider or change to ours, there's definitely time to do so. I can tell you it really doesn't matter who the police departments have. And again, Mr. Ortiz, who has done the lion's share of the work on this, can explain this better than I can. But a link is essentially sent to the police department. They put the information in there and then it's automatically in our cloud-based storage. So it will be easier for us just to obtain it from any police department, whether or not it's Axon or not.
Thank you.
Judge Hall, the police departments in our jurisdiction that use it is Aurora, Elgin, both Dundee's, Carpentersville, Bartlett, Metro, and there's one more. But those are, Bartlett's really small. It's like one neighborhood that's still in Kane County. Metro, we could probably get like a couple cases a year from them, but everybody up north in Kane County uses it, and then Aurora down south.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions or discussion?
The only other question I had, and this is Roger for you on the expense side. So again, this is in addition, and so what are the consequences? I mean, I'm 100% in favor of, but what are the consequences? What is this? This again limits us to being able to really do anything else based upon the additional, we're taking on another couple $100,000 a year.
So this is Roger again. I think the thing that made this work for us was Mr. Onzik saying he had additional revenue. Because when we first looked at this, it was something that we weren't sure how you were going to fund it. When he said he had the additional revenue and he asked us about moving our consulting expenses and we made some adjustments in room to accommodate some things, I think it came together. It is spending the revenue that you receive though. So there's no additional, funding. So if you don't have revenue growth or you have any types of constriction of the revenue, in the future, we'll have to make some decisions about possibly some of the other expenses, whether it's, other personnel expenses that are in there that need to be moved to another fund, or if it's other licensing costs that would need to be moved. If for some reason we had a constriction of the revenue that's available, you do have a million, about 1.1 million fund balance as a cushion, which is good. Gives you time to think if you had to make adjustments. So I think that's a good thing.
So just so that I understand, but I mean, look, for instance, 2 years ago, I'd never heard of DocuSign.
Yes.
Now I don't know how our court system would exist without DocuSign, and that was an additional, is that what,
Yes.
90,000 a year?
90,000 a year.
And so if I understand you correctly, if something like that were to occur, or we saw some other program or software that we needed, it's either using the fund balance that we have or making cuts to what we have in order to be able to afford
Yes.
that. Okay,
Or different sources. Yes.
thank you.
Any other discussion? I think there's about 4 of us here that have been involved in the CMS system since the URL report initially came out, and evaluating Odyssey and what to do, what system to get and what to happen. Monica, me, I believe Court Administrator O'Brien. and Mr. Feinstock. You may have gone to those meetings in the demonstrations as well, Judge Hell, back when we were at the clerk's office and they were making the presentations on the various available competitors on this. E-discovery was always in the discussion. And it wasn't contracted with originally on Tyler, but there was a lot of discussion about whether Tyler had a program on it or what would happen. But it was always in the scheme that eventually we would go down this road. And it would appear from the comments made and what was initially provided for in the Pretrial Fairness Act, that road was coming up pretty fast. There may have been some slowdown of the mandate legislatively, but that does not mean that the need is not there for the efficient running of both the courts and the offices in question that we're responsible for, which is the state's attorney and public defender's office. Having indicated that, any further discussion from any of the commission members?
I'll just say very briefly, for those of us that think about the planet, we're saving costs on paper. We're saving costs on having to buy DVDs that we'd have to burn and send to attorneys and things like that by using these cloud-based resources and licenses too.
Then,
Judge.
oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brewer.
Thank you, Judge Cruz. You just reminded me that was something that I'm looking at cost-wise down the road in the future as to having, I believe it's called SaaS. Is that what it's called? For online, I mean, on cloud-based, our case management system. And it's just something, I know it's very, very costly, but it's just something that I want to have on everybody's radar going forward.
Absolutely. Maybe we can get more information on that in our January meeting.
Sure.
Hearing no further comments or discussion, I am then going to I'm going to call the question as to 4A4 for the draft resolution authorizing a contract with Axon for e-discovery programs for the Kane County State's Attorney's Office and Public Defender's Office. Is there a motion?
I would so move.
Judge Howell has moved.
Second, Barrero.
Ms. Barrero is seconded. All those in favor say aye. Madam Recording Secretary, could you call the roll?
Braga,
Yes, aye.
Barrero,
Yes.
Berman, Conant,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Fida, Payne, Hull,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Masser,
Yes.
Pirog, and Wallers. Passes.
As to then, the next item for vote, the 2023 budget approval for the 127 fund, including that shared line item with the funding for the e-discovery, which was the document for purposes of your quick review, the expense budget worksheet report. Is there a motion for approval to recommend to the county?
So moves, Felton.
Having moved, is there a second?
Hull, second.
Calling the question then for vote, Madam Recording Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Braga,
Yes.
Barrero,
Yes.
Berman, Conant,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Fida, Hain, Hull,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Mosser,
Yes.
Pirog, and Wallers passes.
Thank you very much. The next line item is the proposed meeting dates for 2023. Unless there is something more pressing, it appears that this is in keeping with our prior practices of scheduling ahead of time on everyone's agendas. And we'll keep those. There is a certain number, we have at least one new person. Additionally, I expect that Madam Chairman Pirog is going to be appointing other board members. I'm assuming that those board members have all gone through Open Meetings Act education. I'm not sure that all of the current board members have gone through, or commission members, I should say, have done the Open Meetings Act education as well. I'm going to be asking the state's attorney to help facilitate that with a link that's current. I believe that the Illinois Attorney General has a link for that, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Mosser. I know the last time that this was addressed 5 years ago, the state's attorney's office helped facilitate that. Are you willing and able to try to work with the civil division on that to make sure that all of our commission members have that opportunity?
Absolutely, Judge.
And we will also need to put on the agenda for January, I'm going to say it now so we don't forget. You need to elect a chair for the commission. My term has now expired. And so the new chair and then the prior vice chair is no longer a board member. So Mr. Martin wasn't here. So we need to make sure that that's on the agenda for the next meeting as well. And that is done by a vote of the commission members. I am going to refer you to ordinance 18418, which was the last time that the ordinance was done in full. And there was a 2020 ordinance that was also put in place. Cannot put my finger on that exactly right now, but Ms. Mosser, your office had submitted that previously. When I say your office, it was the state's attorney's office. Mr. McMahon had submitted that and it was approved by the county, and I can get that for you and let you know. And those are the most recent ordinances.
We
on
have
that.
those. I can provide those. Ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Fonstack says that he has that as well. Actually, I do have it. It's 2296, which had to do with the term of the chairman. And so anything that we need to address, I think that we need to put a packet together for everyone just to update what the status is, and we can get that done for our next meeting.
Sure, we can assist in that as well.
Thank you. Other than that, addressing our meetings, is there any other business that is old business that needs to be addressed? Hearing none, if there are agenda items that you would like to see on the agenda for the January 19th meeting, you can contact Roger. I don't think that there's anyone that is specifically assigned in IT to do that.
Bob Enright would be
Bob-
the person right now.
Mr. Enright is going to be that contact person.
Yes.
Okay. Voluntold, we call that.
Yep.
And in the interim, I'm going to ask that we can work on getting an updated, at least temporary list with email addresses for all of the commission members and circulated amongst the commission members.
We have that.
There being no other old business, it appears that we have concluded this. Thank you so much to everyone for your responsiveness in coming to this meeting on the notice that was needed to be expedited to get this presented to the board for Tuesday. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second, Hull.
Ms. Barrero and seconded by Judge Hull. I'm gonna call, for any objections. Let's hear that. Are there any voice objections on this? Hearing none, it being approximately 5:12. Thank you. This meeting is